There's been a lot of rumors circulating recently about the possibility of a hardware revision coming soon for the Switch. And I'm not talking about a Switch XL or a Switch Slim, something that we normally see midway through the development cycle, but an actual performance boost that, for now, let's call the Switch Pro. Recently, we got the 5.0 update for the Switch, which along with all the other little add-ons and changes it made, like, hooray, more profile images, something that data miners discovered is that along with all that information was support for a new PCB and a new chipset for the Switch. Now, in the chipset's case, this isn't actually where people are thinking there's an argument for a more powerful Switch. It looks as though the chipset talked about, which is the T214 from NVIDIA, is just an offshoot of the current Tegra chip that's in the Switch. It's not more powerful, instead it's just, well, more secure. The idea being that it would be part of a quiet hardware refresh for the Switch that'll make it harder to homebrew or mod. So relevant to those of you that want to do hacking on your Switch, but not for most other people. Where we're getting rumors of increased performance is the new PCB that's supposedly supported by the 5.0 software, which supports up to 8 GB of RAM instead of the current 4 gigs that are in Switches. In all likelihood, this increase in RAM support is not actually a sign of a new Switch coming out sometime this year, but rather it's just opening up more power for dev kits so that if there is some kind of Pro model coming out in the future down the line, this is going to allow people to start preparing for that right now. But what would it look like if we were to get a Switch Pro sometime soon? The Switch, as we have it right now, is a perfectly solid and fun system. I mean, evidenced by the fact that it has been selling really, really well. Obviously, no one hates it, but even when it first released, there's a lot of comments people had right away about the design of it that could have been done better. And I'm not just talking about the performance of it. I mean, yes, we can always ask for more performance, more power, better graphics, more RAM, whatever, but there's a lot of stuff with the physical design of the system that could have been done better. We could have a stronger physical design so that it's not warping when it's sitting in the dock for too long. We could have kickstands that actually properly support the system when it's in tabletop mode, maybe having 2 of them so it's actually stable and not going to fall off after you've used it more than 4 times. And if we want to talk more about performance, there's other stuff we could do than just the graphical power of the system. A big thing that I think this system could really benefit from is battery life. I love using the Switch as a dedicated handheld, and it really sucks when I'm playing a big name game on it and I'm only getting 2.5, maybe 3 hours of handheld time before I have to sit down and plug it into something, which gets really annoying. I would rather take that over getting better graphics in handheld mode. There's also the idea of internal storage. Yes, you can buy a micro SD card to store more stuff on the Switch, but it'd be great if the internal storage on it actually allowed you to carry a larger number of games before having to buy any kind of add-on or accessory, especially with how many games are now going pure digital. And when we talk about the idea of a Switch Pro or some kind of revised Switch, something I think we should look at is not just the Switch itself, but also the dock. I mean, let's take a look back at some of those old patents we were all speculating on back when the Switch was still kind of an enigma and mystery. The idea that back then, the Switch dock wasn't just something that you put the Switch into and it would allow it to play games on the TV, but the dock was actually an external power source that would give more graphical power to the system. The one we have right now is basically just a glorified USB-C to HDMI connector. The Switch isn't getting more power from it, it's just not caring about its own performance because battery isn't an issue anymore. So if we got some kind of new revised Switch, we could have one that still has great battery life in portable mode because it's using the same graphics, but then it's still getting even more performance when in TV mode because the dock is actually giving it that extra little oomph it needs. Now, is any of this something that Nintendo might actually do? Maybe. Look, the likelihood of Nintendo doing something like a Switch Pro as soon as this year is just not very high. I mean, yes, there have been system refreshes in the past where you always do things like make something a little slimmer or maybe a little more power efficient, but doing an actual more powerful system only a year and a half, 2 years later just doesn't make sense, especially when the Switch is doing so well. Now, does this mean that Nintendo would never do a more powerful version? No, not at all. I actually think it's very likely that sometime in the next few years we will get some kind of more powerful Switch, because while it may not be, traditional for most companies to do this with a system like this, that's a tradition that's been broken a lot with this latest generation. I mean, we've seen Xbox do this with the One X, where it supports 4K, PlayStation with the PS4 Pro, even Nintendo did this with the 3DS. We had the 3DS in 2011, and 3 years later in 2014, we get the new 3DS, which is more powerful, and there are some games that can only work on that version of the system. So it's not outlandish to think that Nintendo could carry that same kind of process over to the Switch. And I think another really interesting idea to consider is whether or not Nintendo is toying with the idea of doing something like we've seen with phones and tablets, where, yeah, we have the Switch, but every 3 years there's a hardware revision of it that's more powerful. And while they may share the same library across most of the systems, eventually there's a cutoff point where there's new, more powerful, and just better looking games that the newest version will support. Now, honestly, I don't think this is something that Nintendo will do, but they've clearly toyed with the notion before because that's what they did with the 3DS, so it's not impossible.